It was always the Jags. It's always the Jags. It's always the Jags. It's always the Jags. Always the Jags.
Welcome into Always the Jags, your number one podcast for all things Jacksonville, all things Jaguars, all things Duval. Breaking news out of Duval County. Literally, guys, I had just gotten off work when I had seen this news, and I quickly rushed in, put on my Jaguars gear, and got my stuff set up because this is a hammer whammy. Jacksonville Jaguars are extending 2022 first-round pick Travon Walker to a 4-year, $110 million deal. News just came in this afternoon. Looks like James Gladstone has locked up the other half of our bookend duo for the foreseeable future. Now, there's a lot of questions about what this means. Does this mean that the Jaguars... a lot of us weren't expecting us to pay both of our bookends, because usually when people get two fantastic pass rushers, one ends up having to leave. A lot of questions for the Jaguars. Does this mean Josh Allen is playing his way out and Travon Walker is the future? No, because James Gladstone has restructured Josh Hines Allen's contract a few different times. Josh Allen is going to be here for at least the next few years, right alongside Travon Walker. This means the Jaguars believe in this duo so much that they are willing to commit over $50 million on the edges to make sure that we can get home to the quarterback. Between the two of them, they're making a little bit over $50 million, close to $60 million. So you got a $55 million quarterback and two $25+ million edge rushers now on our team. It's kind of a shocker, and I may record a podcast later on to do more of my thoughts about it, but free agency has been so slight that I feel like the first bit of news I had to hop on and get something out, something that we can talk about to give our thoughts on and our opinions on. Travon Walker looks like he'll be making $27 million a year, a little bit slightly under Josh Hines Allen. And it's hard for me to know what to think, right? Because I will freely admit, I was one of the guys in the camp who thought if we could swing Travon Walker and Brian Thomas Jr. for Max Crosby, I would be okay with that trade. That would be a worthwhile trade. And that's something that I would have been okay making happen. You know what I mean? So I don't know how. I think it's about $50 million in guarantees for Travon Walker. Somewhere up there, close to that. So about half guaranteed, which is more favorable for the team. A lot of players usually like to go for 75% guaranteed. So that's favorable for the team. $27 million per year is pretty favorable for the team. It feels like Travon Walker's value kind of dipped when he got hurt. And when he did get hurt, I feel like that kind of made everyone, like Travon Walker's agent wanted to make a deal and the Jaguars wanted to make a deal, in the case he had a breakout season before his price tag would go way up. Because if he gets another 10-sack season, he's had 2 of them under his belt. If he gets another one, his price tag, asking price, will start at $35 million in an era where pass rushers are getting like 40. So it was the right time to make the move. My only question, and again, I don't know if the Raiders would have made this deal, but I don't love the idea of getting rid of Brian Thomas Jr., don't get me wrong. But if that was feasible on the table, and we could have brought in Max Crosby and given him $50 million in guaranteed money over the next 2 years, I don't know. Like I said, I don't know if it's possible, but I don't know how many Jags fans would look at that and say, yeah, this is better. Now, maybe Max Crosby falls off over the next 2 years. My fear is that we haven't quite seen Travon Walker really get it going. Or maybe it's just that we haven't really had a chance to see the benefit of him really getting going. You could argue that we just need a third edge rusher, right? Someone to put in there on obvious pass rushing downs after we stopped. And that's where we're lacking to get that, those teams that have led the league in sacks with the Eagles, the Broncos, where they just have guys coming after you wave after wave. That's what it feels like we need. Now, the draft is looking more favorable for us to get a guy like that who's just a designated pass rusher. I still feel like Travon Walker could use some more moves. 10.5 sacks is not bad, but you watch the tape and he still continues to rush with power and just use his overwhelming strength. Now, it is overwhelming and it helps him stuff the run game, but, kind of at this point, I feel like I'm still, wondering, is he going to put it together? And I guess the Jaguars feel like he has. And I mean, again, based upon the way that these edge rush contracts have been going, Daniil Hunter, $40 million 1 year extension. You could argue it's a bargain, right, for the Jaguars. It's just, I think we're still waiting for him to break out. But again, when you're the number one overall pick, right, and the last edge before you was Myles Garrett, okay, yeah, the expectations are going to be a little tough, right? You got a guy who just broke the sack record. You're going to be compared to him because you were the last edge taken, right? If I'm not mistaken, because it was Trevor before him, Burrow before him, Murray before him, and Mayfield before him. All quarterbacks. Myles Garrett, then Travon Walker was the next edge taken number one overall. And since then, it's been only quarterbacks taken number one overall between Bryce Young. 2024 was Caleb Williams, and then Cam Ward last year. So, whenever someone who's not a quarterback goes number one overall, it's a lot of scrutiny and it's a lot to live up to. And, for a guy picked at the bottom of the first round or second or third round, I mean, Travon Walker's had a tremendous career, and I think most people would be like, yeah, he's worth it. But it's just because he was the number one overall pick. And that's, you go towards transcendent. That's what you're looking for. And so it's hard to separate the two. Like if Travon Walker was a third round pick or a second round pick, would I love this contract? Would I love that we were able to keep him around? You could make an argument, right? Like if I took the same stats and put it on a third round pick player, I'd be very happy with that. But it's not on a third round pick player. But at the same time, is he still worth that money, right? So obviously, this means that we would not be going through with my trade idea to get Max Crosby in the building. Um, but yeah, it's kind of hard for me to. I did think his number was going to come in around 25. I was hoping we'd keep it around 25. Ended up being 27. I did think there was a world where he could get 30 or 35. And I think it's interesting how James Gladstone chose to retain Travon Walker over Devin Lloyd, right? Between those two guys. Because we did pick up Travon Walker's fifth year option. So we had time. And these cap hits, and in fact, maybe the cap hits for Travon Walker won't hit until Josh Allen's cap hit starts to lessen a little bit. But this also does, I think, lessen Travon Walker's cap hit for this year because he's on the fifth year option. So this gives James Gladstone a little bit more room to make some moves. With this extension, I saw a lot of people extending him for like 30 million and stuff like that. I think this is more reasonable for him to come in under Josh Hines Allen. And during the season, when Josh Hines Allen was having that transcendent season, we could have got him for 25 million a year until Brian Burns signed his deal. You know what I mean? Like that was kind of what ended up having to push us up to 28. And if we had done that, Trevor Walker would have come in under 24. So that's just the issue of not getting the deals done in time. But again, when it comes back to Trayvon Walker specifically, it's not a good bad deal for us, right? I think it's hard because this season he was hurt a lot. And it's hard to feel like our run defense was still good for a lot of the year. But you could argue that, like, okay, he had 3.5 sacks. Well, yeah, he was hurt. So imagine how much better our pass rush would have been if he was healthy, right? And, again, Devin Lloyd kind of played his tail off. And we ended up opting for retaining the edge rusher over Devin Lloyd. Now, again, edge rusher is a much more valuable position. It's much tougher to get good at. And it's much like it's a premium position because quarterback is the most premium position. And so, what's the next most premium position? Getting that quarterback on the ground and disrupting him. That's why it's the next most valuable position in the NFL. And so, I can understand from a perspective why he was kept. But also remember um, in the compensatory pick game, I was thinking we let Travon Walker go so we could play the comp pick game, and that could have netted us a third round pick. Losing Devin Lloyd probably got us a fourth rounder, if I'm not mistaken. We should get a fourth round compensatory pick based upon what he signed for. And then also, again, there's the argument that linebackers cost a lot less than edge rushers, right? So if you have to pay somebody, like if you're going to pay one of the best linebackers or pay one of the best edge rushers, you're going to save money by paying one of the best linebackers. And then if you're going to draft, that would be a good time to take a gamble on an edge rusher because he'll be cost controlled, right, on his rookie deal. But again, it's much easier to replace linebackers than it is to replace edge rushers. That's why they get paid so much. That's why they get drafted so high. That's why they rarely ever trickle down the board. Like anyone past, if you're an edge rusher, anyone past the third round is almost like a project kind of player. You know what I mean? Someone that's just gonna have to. You're just taking a whiff on. Um, so because like to me, if I'm looking at free agency and extending players, like I'd want to extend the cheapest positions. But also again, the cheapest positions, they're cheap because they're easier to replace. And it's like if you have money tied up in a cheap position that's easy to replace, then you may not be able to pay for it for a premium position when you get someone transcendent, like an edge, like the Trevor Lawrence, a quarterback you've been searching for your entire life as a franchise. So a lot of thoughts on it. Overall, I'm not mad at it. I'm not upset at it. I think it's a good deal for all parties involved. I think I was kind of expecting like the superstar move. But honestly, I just want to see our team continue to succeed. And if Anthony Campanelli feels like there's more to see from Travon Walker, I'm willing to see it. And again, I'm willing to put trust in James Gladstone as far as getting this done. I think it's been, I was one of those guys who pounded the table that we should start Walker Little and play him and pay him. And then we did, right? And Trump Bulky gave him a much more modest deal than what we gave Cam Robinson. And then this year he started sucking it up, right? And I'm not saying that's going to happen to Trayvon Walker, but you just never know, unfortunately. So I do like that we're making an effort to retain and re-sign our own players. Question is, will Parker Washington end up being back next year? Honestly, I think that's another comp pick game. I think Brenton Strange is going to cost less. I think you let Parker Washington start. I think he's going to run up his value. And then I think by then, Travis Hunter and Brian Thomas Jr. will be ready to, we'll be playing with them and Jacoby Myers. And obviously, we love Parker Washington. But again, James Gladstone knows what he wants to do in the comp pick game. And if he feels like he's already got someone on the roster who can replace him, then I think he's willing to make that move, right? Like, because Parker Washington plays in the slot a lot and he can play outside. Okay, yeah, Brian Thomas Jr., Travis Hunter can do the same thing, and Jacoby Myers can obviously play the slot. So there's a lot going on decision making wise there. I think when you look at Travon Walker, yeah, there's no one on our roster who could replace him. There's just not, right? So we'll see. So let me know your thoughts down below about this extension, about this trade. What does this mean for the franchise? Is this a good move? Are you glad to see Travon Walker sticking around? Um, and don't ever forget, it was always the Jags.